Hello. So today we'll be talking about Kubernetes admission controller, right, and also initializer. Now, one thing that you will realize is we have. I'm very sure for those who have used Kubernetes extensively, they know about the admission controller, right? Right. So the admission controller, right, that intercepts your object creation and decides whether they pass or fail. Now we have something called initializers. So why do we have the concept of initializer is to give you the ability to dynamically how do I say this, uh control your object creation without having to package your application as part of the Kubernetes main code base. So your application doesn't have to be part of the main Kubernetes upstream repo for it to be able to make changes to created objects. Now, for example, we have a couple of admission controller that is packaged with Kubernetes, and you can turn them on or off by passing command line option to the API server, right? Now the problem is, right, so I want to do some stuff, and I don't want to write my own admission controller. I just want to be, for example, I want to make sure every pod that is created by in my cluster has a certain annotation, or are pulling from certain repo. They are not trying to pull from unsecured repo. I'm trying to make sure every image, every container that is created in my cluster, right, every pod rather, their image pool policy is always right. So those kind of things I want to do, but I don't want to go ahead and start writing my own admission controller, right? And I don't want to start packaging up, having to restart the API server to do those. Now that is where initializer comes in. You can use a couple of things like webhook, but in this case I'm going to be talking about initializers. Now the initializers are like they are controllers, right? Just like every controller, they watch the API server for object changes, and then they make their necessary changes or add the annotation or do whatever they need to do. In this case, let's say I'm trying to write an initializer that simply validates that and that every pod that is being created in my cluster has certain annotation, and if they don't, add the annotation, right? So this is the initializer I'm trying to do. So in my cluster, after creating that particular initializer in my cluster, once a pod is submitted, right, the first thing that goes is, before it goes to the scheduler, right, so it's going to be the creation itself is going to be validated, but before the object goes to the scheduler, before it's being scheduled, it goes in what we call a pending state. A pending state in the sense that all the initializer that selects that particular object type, in this case pod or deployment, that select that particular object type, the controller is going to wait, right? So there's going to be like a wait for them to process those objects. So what is going to happen is, let's say I have about 3 initializer in my cluster, right? So after the object is created, the annotation, there's going to be an annotation update on the pod with the names of the initializer that needs to process that particular pod or deployment. Now once those changes, the initializers are going to be notified. They are going to process the objects, make the appropriate change, right, remove their name from the list of initializer that need to process that object. Now once the initializer list is now empty, then it's going to be submitted to the kube scheduler, right? Now, so that gives you the opportunity to make any modification to the object before it gets scheduled. in the Kubernetes cluster. But with that kind of power comes great responsibility, in the sense that you have to make sure that your initializer passes. If something happens to your initializer and it's blocking, in the sense that it fails to process an object or remove its name from the list of the initializer, pending initializer, it's going to block the object scheduling, which is going to block every object creation in your cluster. So that's why there's a guide for those that are interested. There's a guide online on best practices when writing an initializer, and this is a sample one for those that are interested. It simply gives you like a very simple walkthrough of initializers, right? This is from Joe Beta presentation, and there is one I saw on GitHub Gist that is very simple, that walks you things about initializer. Initializers are controllers, right? But they are controllers that run before your object is scheduled into the Kubernetes cluster. They are just like every controller, but the difference between them and other controllers, they watch for uninitialized objects. They don't watch for normal objects. They watch for objects that have not been initialized, right? And after, because you have to pass in a special flag to be able to see those objects, so they watch for those objects and make their changes. After making their changes, then the objects can be scheduled. So this is a very good opportunity for those who are looking into enforcing policy most of the time, making sure that, for example, you can it's a way to enforce things like right, let's say you are trying to enforce object environment or tagging. I'm thinking of tagging. I'm thinking of things like image pool policy. I'm thinking of things like secrets, injecting container, just like Istio. So those are the use cases of initializer, and it's you don't have to restart your API server, right, to be able to use it, right? So that's it for initializer. Please, if you have a question, please reach out to me, and hopefully one of these days I'm going to get the time to put together a very simple initializer that does one very, very simple task, just for understanding, right? That's it for now. I'm going to see you next time.